This assumption that Hinduism is this kind of a homogenous thing, exactly like Islam and exactly like Christianity, is not true. And we should not carry that burden of trying to be like the Christian faith or the Jewish faith or the Islamic faith.
India House Foundation is fortunate enough to have Devdutt Pattanaik in conversation, author, mythologist. In fact, a popularizer and reinterpreter of Indian mythology on a scale which has not been seen since Amar Chitra Katha. The difference, I suppose, is that Devdutt puts it in a modern idiom. He compares it with modern media, popular culture, and therefore he's able to reach audiences, including in the diaspora, which would either be cut off from this discourse. So, Devdutt, we've just survived another Diwali. The news is all about air quality index, but I think it's also an opportunity to remind ourselves that despite the the trend towards seeking unity, cultural unity, as a basis of political unity, historically, the Hindu faith has absorbed traditions from all over, from different castes and classes, from different regions, different ethnicities. And Diwali is a great example of that. So in central and north India, it's the lamps are lit to show Ram the way home from exile. And in East India, it's the celebration of Kali, who is, to people who are not from that region, a frightening goddess. So can you tell us more of the multiple traditions which have gone into Diwali?
So I think we should first clarify the word religion before we get into celebrations. So religion is a 200-year-old concept. It didn't exist before 200 years old. And it is an idea that comes to India through colonial forces. And it basically refers to, the kind of a identity which is based on which you accept in your lifetime. So it involves conversion. And you can join it and leave it. So religion is something like an institution that I join or I leave. Even if I inherit it, I'm asked whether I want to join it. There's a baptism ritual by which I establish a covenant. So this is the broad definition of religion around the world. Hinduism doesn't fall into this category because you don't convert. Nobody can convert to Hinduism. Although nowadays a lot of gurus go out there and you have people from all parts of the world saying, I'm Hindu, because they join a cult and the cult says, okay, now you're a guru's disciple and therefore you're Hindu. And so you have all colors of Hindus out there, but you don't convert to Hinduism. You're born a Hindu. And really, you're not even born a Hindu, you're born into a caste. And that is your primary identity, a caste which no matter how much we try to deny this, which we have done for the last 70 years, the fact is I don't know Hinduism from any book. I don't know Hinduism from any teacher. My Hinduism comes from my parents. My parents taught me. They migrated to Mumbai. They gave me a set of traditions. I absorbed a set of traditions from people around me. There is no standard way in which Diwali is celebrated. There is no standard date, which date starts, when it ends, different parts of India. And because we are in an interconnected world, we have access to a lot of information. We realize that Diwali has many things for many people. And that is a rude realization even for Hindus. And it's because this assumption that Hinduism is this kind of a homogenous thing, exactly like Islam and exactly like Christianity, is not true. And we should not carry that burden of trying to be like the Christian faith or the Jewish faith or the Islamic faith. We are not like that. Like Shinto. The Japanese are Shinto. You can't become or say I am a follower of Shintoism. You have to be born Japanese to follow Shintoism. You don't convert to Taoism. if you are Chinese and Han Chinese, it's part of being Chinese and it's part of who you are. And Hinduism is something like that. The word Hinduism gives this illusion of homogeneity. But that's the mistake that people do, and that's the kind of a political narrative for the last since independence, and even before independence. We are trying to imagine a common Hinduism, which invariably ends up as either North Indian or Brahminical, which is both unfair because India is not North India and India is definitely not Brahmin. So if you remove these two things, there is a whole, 80% of India falls into that, which is neither North Indian and neither Brahminical. And I think that is an important thing that people have to recognize. Since Hindus themselves and Indians themselves don't know this, how do we expect others from other part of the world to understand this? So we ourselves do not know the diversity of our culture. That you mentioned Kali of Bengal, but there is ancestor worship in Odisha, which happens during Diwali. And it's Bengal. You think of what happens with the Jains of India, and the Jains also celebrate Diwali, but it's nothing to do with what Hindus do. It's to do with Mahavir's nirvana and his rise to the Siddhalaya. Or it is a Sikh festival, but it's completely different. It's called, I think, Bandi Chhod, where I think one of the gurus was released from Jahangir's prison, and that's what is marked this day. So there are so many different levels. Goa, it is about Narakasur and Krishna, not even Ram.
Yeah.
Somewhere it's the goddess festival, it's a Lakshmi festival, it's a Durga festival, somewhere it's a Ram festival, somewhere it's a Krishna festival. So there are many asuras are being worshipped. So there is a whole bunch of Diwalis. There is no single Diwali, and I think this straitjacketing and trying desperately to be a religion is a burden that I definitely do not carry. I use the word mythology because it's a more easy word to explain. Even if I have to explain Islam to people, I say it's a Islamic mythology and story, symbols, rituals, which Christian mythology, there is a story, symbol, ritual. And I think that sort of, for me, has been a useful word, which irritates people because they don't know these terminologies. But that's the way it is. Complex subject, and culture is complex.
Through the latter half of the 20th century, in several parts of the world, there was a recession of religion from, at least from public life. After that period, one sees the rise of a certain kind of amoral politics, where it's all about instrumentality, it's all about practicality, and when something truly vile happens, people, including editorial writers, say, "Oh, that's politics." Do you think it's because people are no longer, I'm not talking specifically about India, but in India also some of these features have become visible. But do you think it's because we have become estranged from the stories that we used to grow up with? We were moralized through stories, not really through faith.
Well, faith, morality, these words are complex words and we use them very casually. Like the morality and ethics really are ideas which come again from a West Asian culture. And what has happened is, let's look at how history is written. You have a whole bunch of young historians writing history now, who are, bringing a new way of explaining Indian past. And if you read history carefully, and it's nothing to do with a left wing, right wing, you observe how historians write history. They write it as an instrument. They do not talk, they talk about the political and the economic side of history and almost are dismissive of the faith which underlies a political or an economic decision. So all historians, whether it's a JNU or a Delhi University or a right-wing historian or a left-wing historian, doesn't matter. When I read a history textbook, I see how they deracinate history. So if a king attacks a temple, they will say, it's for economic reasons, it's for political ambition, it's for greed. It has nothing to do with religion. It's not communal, it is pure greed, which means all kings in this world are driven only by greed and ambition. Why would you invade any other country? Because you're greedy and ambitious. It has nothing to do with faith. Now, this kind of disingenuous discourse is part of academia around the world. For example, in Europe, let's talk in international, when you talk of the Crusades, historians will say that the Crusades have nothing to do with Christianity and Islam. It is really a political fight for land grabbing. and it's all about money, and it's about economics, and this is what happened economically, and this is politics and land grab movements. It's nothing to do with Christianity. वो बहाना है. It's a propaganda, and we should not follow the religious discourse. The real discourse is politics and economics. The moment I hear this conversation that reality is economics and politics, now we are facing the brunt of it. Because now you're seeing, okay, this is what happens to a world where if everything is about economics and politics, and where does faith come in? Like, why does the nation state exist? Why do politicians exist? So now politicians are behaving exactly the way historians have imagined them. And you have constructed these politics because you're telling it's all about, and that's why you have oligarchs ruling the world, because oligarchy is the way you imagine the world, and all kings were oligarchs, and they were served by oligarchs and bankers, and so you have, in a way, your history is coming true. The imaginary, I call the historical imagination of historians who are apparently social scientists, who have removed myth and religion from their writings. And now we're seeing this happening because what is a king? Why does a state exist? Why did kingdoms exist? Why did Genghis Khan conquer the world? Why did Islam spread the way it did? We don't want to discuss it. We only want to talk about how it spreads through its political move, its economic move. It's the Marxist thinking, the cultural Marxism. And what has happened is this is a reaction to old history. Before the Second World War, history was written like a civilizational thing, the march of civilization. So you have these British historians saying how great Britain was, and then Indians saying how no, India was also great. And so our Indian historians were talking about the great Indian culture because we wanted independence. And every nation state needs a story about its past. And therefore you construct, because nation states did not exist 200 years ago. So you now imagine a story and you construct a story, and you created these bunch of stories which are civilizational. And then new historians emerged post-World War. After the World War, they started looking at the world only through the lens of oppressor and oppression. So if you read any history textbook, you can actually see what the historian is doing. They're saying, okay, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. And good guys are actually all the poor people around the world, despite, it doesn't matter which part of the world. And all bad guys are the rich guys, the bankers, the kings, the politicians. That's the way you're imagining history. And you're seeing this, what I call left-wing history, right-wing history emerging. And this is manifesting today. It's like, when you say that America is built by slavery only, and you reduce everything to a simplistic narrative, then people say, oh, I want simple answers. And then you start coming up with these simple things. And then that's what you're seeing around the world today. A collapse of thought, feeling, imagination. Why do you exist? Why do kings exist? Because historians are telling us again and again that every king was greedy politician. And now with new political ideas like socialism and capitalism, we will create a noble world order. And that has failed. And now you're like, who are you fooling? And I really look at historians with disdain today. I have very high regard, but as the years progress, and now I see these young people coming on internet, they're talking, very good scholars, data, fantastic data, but how you join the dots reveals your politics. And I think that's what's happening around the world. We are paying the price for the secret, the secret which the historians have put into the cosmos. They imagined the past is full of oligarchs, and they've created a future which is full of oligarchs.
On the other hand, there's a school of thought among historians, sociologists, and so on, who believe that the way we see ourselves, the categories in which we have put ourselves, are completely Western derived. For instance, the word caste has no Indian basis, right? It's jati and stuff like that. We have other words for that. They mean specific things. Caste doesn't mean anything in the Indian context. It's a Portuguese word which was appropriated by the English because they wanted to understand society by classifying it. Now, one compelling thing about this is that in the same period, in the 19th century and the 18th century, in Europe, there was taxonomies were seen as instruments for understanding the universe. So in chemistry, you have the periodic table. You arrange everything in its little, and that works. Yeah, within chemistry, it works beautifully. In biology, you have the Linnean system.
So these
binomial
historians,
nomenclature.
I would not trust these historians.
So do you think we have constructed ourselves also in India in accordance with a taxonomy which doesn't really belong?
So I know the historians you're referring to, and they're really well qualified and they speak good English. But to say that the word caste came with the Portuguese, a good historian just look beyond words and understand concepts. Words are just words. People look at the world through words. We need words to explain. It's like saying Shakespeare can never be translated, and therefore I can never understand Shakespeare. Because it has only be read in English. Because only when I read it, or a Vedic scholar saying that you cannot understand the Vedas unless you know Sanskrit. Right now there are people who keep saying that you can't translate the word kama, dharma, artha, moksha, taking a cue from these idiotic historians who are trying to get some tenureship in an American university, writing exactly what their funders are telling them to write. And let's be very clear about it. Every historian needs the funding, and the funder decides whether he'll get the funding. So there's nothing objective about any of these historians. So when they give this historical thing of casta, I keep asking one thing. Let's look at an idea called untouchability. And untouchability is not, let's not use the word caste, don't use the word jati, don't use the word varna. Just tell me, did untouchability exist before Europeans? The practice. There you have it. Like, why do you need such complicated words? Like, remove the word jati. These are Brahmin words written by upper caste men. Language itself, you're reading Sanskrit, upper caste language. English, upper caste language. Elite language. Colonial language. Remove all languages. Let's look at the word untouchability. And please ask that historian to write the history of untouchability. Remove the word caste. And to say that the thing did not exist before the British is cruel and inhuman and immoral. And such historians should be really the worst people on earth. And they are not right-wing. They are highly educated, highly regarded, highly awarded and rewarded historians of Europe and America. Indians, and they use this stupid line. And I'm like, they don't even realize what they're doing because they are giving fodder to ridiculous, uneducated politicians saying that, you know what? So now you have judges in India saying caste did not exist before the British. So they are serving the cause of people who are waiting to manipulate. To say that untouchability did not exist before the Portuguese came up with the word casta is fraud. I'm sorry. I will never respect this historian. I know exactly who you are talking about. Not one, but there are 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, so you have to read what is the legal documents of the Maratha kings saying before the British controlled the Maratha kingdoms. Read the legal documents of Rajput kings before the British were anywhere in sight. Read the Nepal government creating in the 19th century Mulk Ain, the laws of the land, and tell me, forget the words. Ask ChatGPT to tell you to explain it to you. And even ChatGPT can do a better job than a historian because it will tell you dispassionately that discrimination based on who will drink water, whose water can you drink, whose shadow is acceptable, who shall be seen, who shall be untouched. These practices existed as early. The first reference to it probably is the Chinese chronicles. The Chinese saw these practices at the time of the Guptas, even before the arrival of Huan Sang. So in the 3rd, 4th century we have records. Now you can say that the Chinese misunderstood because the Chinese word, and you can play these games of linguistic postmodern language. And that's this mischief that these historians do. And they've contributed to the chaos that is in the country today. They should be publicly pulled up.
As part of this discourse, a new phenomenon has developed. It's called storytelling. And people have become storytellers.
Yes.
So even journalists like me, they put storyteller in their CVs. Other people do it too. Historians are as you're saying, very often storytellers. Politicians are definitely storytellers. Now, when you put a journalist and a politician in the same category as an agent, are you blurring the line between truth and fiction? And in that light, how should one read the older texts, the imaginative texts, not the factual ones?
First of all, the binary. There is no factual text. Let's be very clear about it. There is fact and there is fiction. Definition of fact is measurement. It has to be measured. And it's always to be doubted, because you come from doubt and you use measurement to see it. And science really measures, has experimentation, which is to validate it. And you're constantly falsifying it, right? You can do this with physics, chemistry, and biology. You cannot do this with economics. You cannot do this with politics. You cannot do this with history. Now, history is pretending to be a science. It's not a science. It's not physics, chemistry, biology. Let's be very clear about it. So it is you have a set of facts, and how you join the dots depends on you. And everybody can decide which fact do I pick, how many facts do I pick, how do I join the dots. Like, I'll give you a metaphor. Stars are natural. Star is a fact. The stars in the sky, right? You can argue the stars don't exist, it's just light and all that, but we know that it's measurable phenomena called stars. And everybody can see the star. You can see the star, I can see the star. But the moment I say constellation is not a fact anymore, because it is a cluster of stars that we have imagined to represent an animal or a bird, and therefore we create the zodiac to divide the sky for functional reasons. So constellation and stars are very different. So facts are stars. A fantasy writer doesn't care for the stars. He just looks at constellations and imagines new constellations without stars. A historian looks at the stars and says, okay, this is the way I join the dots. But he has to acknowledge that other people join the dots differently. He is not telling the truth. He is saying that I have looked at these dots and therefore come to this conclusion. And no human being on earth can look at all the facts. There are just too many facts out there. So you have to sieve through the facts and decide what is it that you privilege and what you do not privilege. And how do you present facts? Like, recently someone wrote a history of 5,000 years of history, this lady historian, and I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my God, cherry picking of facts is so clear, because you are responding to a group of people in the market. You are not writing history. You are an activist more than a historian. So storytelling is a technique. Now, a story can be true, it can be based on facts. Let's not use the word true. It can be based on facts, can be based without facts. If based on facts comes to how do you join the dots? Who is joining the dots? What is the politics you are bringing into the table? Who is allowing the story to be told? In which context is the story being told? All that shapes the narrative, right? So when something comes from a university today, I will say that which kind of university is it? If it's a Christian university and it publishes a paper on Hinduism, I will be a little wary of what I'm reading. If it's a Jewish scholar writing about Hinduism, I'll be a little careful about what I'm reading. I'll read a little bit about the background of the Jewish historian and say, okay, this is the background they come from. Are they Holocaust survivors? Where are they coming from? Or I see a right-wing conference on history calling a Belgian guy, and I check out and I figure out that the Belgian has no historical training, but seems to be spouting history a lot. And then you just do a quick Google search and you realize it comes from a Christian fundamentalist organization. And you're like, okay, now I know where the story is coming from. Right? So stories come from somewhere and they are for someone and they're funded by somebody. And therefore, if you're aware of where the story is coming from, story is entertaining. It's meant to entertain. It's not meant to inform. It's meant to entertain. And if you reduce reportage into entertainment and history into entertainment and a pot boiler, then you are going to make the joining of the dots will be flawed. And that's the problem. Some very good historians are not famous because they're not good storytellers, right? They don't know that, they don't have the chutzpah, they don't have the media presence. They don't know how to tell the story, but they have really good information. I read PhD papers of scholars which are so brilliant, but they're not there in the public circulation, right? And they're really good PhD papers. I know historians from, Ravenshaw College in Odisha or from IIT Mandi, and I'm reading their papers and I ask other historians, the famous historians, have you heard of him? No. Have you heard of him? No. So they don't read each other. So the storytelling business has to be understood. As a mythologist, my whole job is to understand how stories transmit themselves. How did history as a thing emerge? Who created history? How do you decide? In a court of law, both the lawyers are telling stories and the judge decides which story is real. And we all know that judges are shaped by post-retirement benefits. So they don't tell you the truth, are they? They're not telling you the truth. They're telling you what enables them to get bungalows after retirement. So, every judgment should be read that, there should be a caveat. This judge got a government bungalow after retirement. This judge did not get a government bungalow after retirement. And I think if somebody creates a software, and I think the famous Silicon Valley in America should do that if they want to serve the country, is to look at the database which is openly available, the Indian Judiciary database, map all the stories told to the people telling the stories, the lawyers, the activists, the judges, and their colorful long narratives that they write in their judgment, where they quote only Western scholars and never quote Indian scholars, tells you so much about the storytelling in the court.
Speaking of Western scholars, I remember Joseph Campbell did say that people don't understand. I'm paraphrasing, but people don't understand fact; they understand stories, which is why it's applied from from advertising to history. The format is applied. Now, you have been writing recently on mythology being used in popular cinema, and some of it is very good cinema actually. I think many of our readers may not know about these films. Would you like to say something about that?
Well, the thing is, when Joseph Campbell says that people listen to stories, I think many of these people say these wonderful romantic statements without realizing the stories can be manipulated. That story by itself is nothing holy about it. It's just a way our brain receives things.
That's what he meant, actually.
Yeah. The thing is, Joseph Campbell never understood Eastern and Western mythologies of the rest of the world. He created the monomyth and believed everybody follows the monomyth. They were the universalists. They came from the school of thought of comparative mythology, which was trying to see what is universal about humans. In that, they refused to see the diversity of humans and how humans are different. And I think that I come from the diverse school of thought, that what makes us different? Why are Chinese stories different? Why are Hollywood stories different? So I noticed that Hollywood stories, for example, will always talk about how America is going to save the world, right? They keep telling you they're going to save the world, save the world. Batman saves the world. Harry Potter saves the world. Everybody's saving the world. Lord of the Rings is done about saving the world. They're constantly
and aliens always attack New York.
New York is because it's about New York, right?
The aliens always attack New York.
Yeah, so aliens. So now the aliens have actually come in. They have, again, your wishful thinking has come true, because you have been, for last 20 years, you've been producing films of zombies coming and attacking you. They've come, we call them immigrants. But, the zombies came, they're there, they're going to take over. And, all kinds of religions who dress fabulously and perform strange practices in public. So the storytelling, which manufactured by Hollywood, was the mythology of America, which was constructed and believed in. And they start believing that we are the saviors of the world. Now, Indians have, especially, I think, they've been seeing all these, they want their own Batman, Spider-Man. And therefore, they're taking, Indian gods are now behaving like Superman, Superwoman. So Ram becomes a superhero. And Krishna, and I had meet a lot of these filmmakers. Right now there is a film based on Karnataka's folk deities, and they have all become henchmen, divine henchmen. If you have a problem, call the gods, he'll beat up your enemy. Because you are the nice guy and your enemy is the bad guy, and you pray a lot to God, and all the God will do, like Batman, come and beat them up. And that's what we have reduced Sanatan Dharma to. Gods are basically bullies who fight on your side. And that's what you see school children watching films where Krishna is a lovable bully. And everybody is beating up people. Hanuman beats up people. So I tell people, which musical instrument does Hanuman use? And they'll say, music? But doesn't he have a gada in his hand? Because that's what your storyteller has decided to tell your children. And because you decided to give your child the iPhone because you didn't want to do parenting, and now they are listening to these horrifying stories written by people who only want the TRP ratings and are not interested in scriptures, you are going to get this whole Bollywoodization of storytelling, and you have all these, Krishna Bhakts with drums, and they wear all these colorful costumes, and they'll go and watch the show. And gods have become cosplay, right? Now in cosplay, you have people dressing up like Ram and Krishna and Hanuman, and the poor folk gods, which really were belonging to untouchable communities, have been Brahminized. And now they are Varaha and Krishna and Hanuman and Narasimha, all Brahminized, and they've put the sacred thread on them. And I'm like, look, this is storytelling. Now, in this storytelling, what is the aim of the storyteller? So what is happening around the world is how stories are being told, because we have told that there's a truth, and then there is a story, and then suddenly one day people said, no, story is the truth. And he started conflating this because, postmodern thinking came in, which sort of argues about everything and finds everything problematic. Because we really don't understand what science can do, what technology can do. We started imagining history as science. We started imagining economics as science. Science makes things predictable. If your subject doesn't make it predictable, it's not science. History does not know how to predict the future. Economics, politics cannot predict the future. Finance cannot predict the future. Therefore, they're not sciences. We are trying very hard to make predictable history. But you can make a predictable technology, but you can't make predictable history, economics. And because human beings are not designed that way. Culture is not designed that way. So when I'm seeing this storytelling, they're trying to control and make society and trying to shape society using a particular narrative. Whether it's Bollywood, whether it's Hollywood, they're using these techniques. And I keep getting approached, sir, we have to save the future generation. And I'm like, why do you want to save? Where is the savior complex coming from? Because everybody wants to be a prophet. And everybody wants to, save the world, because prophets are meant to save the world. But Hinduism does not have prophets. The concept of prophecy is not there in Hinduism. The concept of a judgmental God is not there in Hinduism. Hindu gods don't give you commandments. They don't tell you how to live your life. So nowadays I've heard these people saying, Sanatan Dharma kaha gaya hai? And I'm like, kaha gaya hai? So they come up with their own commandments, they've Old Testament, New Testament. It sounds more like Christianity. But just because you're wearing orange and you've got, vertical marks and horizontal marks on your face and you look like a character from Amar Chitra Katha, doesn't mean you have actually read the scriptures. You're actually telling me the Bible packaged in saffron. Because gods are always fighting. There's apocalyptic war going to happen. The angels and demons will fight. And of course, you are the angel. And, Trump is the Messiah. And that's exactly the language which everybody uses in every nation state. Every nation state today is run by Superman, who's going to save the country from evil zombies. And we know where the story is coming from. We have heard these stories. We have told these stories to our children. Wait till the Gen Alpha grows up. They will have more interesting stories to tell. So stories, one has to be very careful when somebody tells me I'm telling you a story, because he's trying to stir emotions. He's not interested in the mind, the developing of the mind, he's not interested in thinking. He's interested in feeling. The postmodern, the woke lobby who only feel. They don't think. They don't want to think. They all want to feel. And that's a very dangerous way of approaching storytelling, mythology, religion, faith, history. So those words which we speak need to be I think that understanding is lacking both in STEM departments and in the who call themselves humanities. They're not humanity professors. They're just people wanting to be STEM. So,
yeah. Now, in our country, we have a fine tradition of creative products developing into real entities in the human imagination. Like when Devakinandan Khatri wrote Chandrakanta, it was a pure work of fiction which was serialized every month. Everybody knew it was fiction. I think about 50 years later, there was a temple to her, to Chandrakanta.
yes.
Then I saw this, if you remember this controversy over this movie called Padmavat, they also had to change its name.
Yeah.
And all because of some fringe people in Gurgaon. Frankly, that was all there was to it. And but Padmavat was a work of fiction originally. It was not even based on fact. And then there was Santoshi Ma, who was a cinema creation and started a cult in which people didn't eat bananas for a long time. Women, they stopped eating bananas for a long time. And there were temples to Santoshi Ma also, who was purely fictional, modern fictional. And then there's a different class of temples. There are temples to Modi, there are temples to Trump, perhaps to other people also. So what does it say about us, this tendency to deify everything, even creatures of our own imagination, our current imagination?
That's true in all cultures. It's nothing unique to India. It's there everywhere. So in America, for example, you have these fabulous churches where they do circus tricks and they sing and they dance and they're pop artists and talking about the Messiah, the evangelicals, the Pentecostals, the Methodists, Mormon church is the most beautiful church in the world. I really love the Mormons because they just have created a new story which says Jesus came to America, planets and everything. And there are millions and millions of people who believe in Mormonism. So it's, if you go to the Islamic world, there is no one Islam out there. There are these different schools of thought, the Arab schools, the Persian school, the Syrians, the Lebanese. This assumption that there is one Islam is a creation of the media. It doesn't exist anywhere. I don't think any Arab Muslim thinks he's equal to a Pakistani Muslim or an Indonesian Muslim. Each one has their own different culture. They have dargahs, they have holy men. The idea of dargah is absolutely horrifying in the Islamic world. So it's just not acceptable to the Sunnis. Sufism is one of those things which is not accepted. So you have all kinds of constructions of this world that everybody romanticizes the Sufis, but never talks about the fact that they are Ghazis. They were the cavalry brigades. So what happens is, which story are we telling, and which story are we focusing on? Let's look at a book written by Nehru, who says Discovery of India. Right? Have you heard of this famous book called Discovery?
Yeah,
is it a work of fiction or is it a work of fact?
I see what you mean.
Yeah, but you see, the examples that we give are always, either they are of the non-elite group of people and not of the English-speaking elite who sits in, So Discovery of India looks at South India as a unit. It doesn't talk of the Chalukyas and the Cholas. Or look at its television production done in Doordarshan, about at the same time when the Ramayana serial came up. And the Ramayana serial fired the imagination of India. Everybody wanted to see the Ramayana serial. But at the same time, Discovery of India was being done and it was presented as more historical, but it was storytelling. Because what you show and which story do you tell, because everybody who reads I always watch the episodes where they talk about the Upanishads, and if you look at them, whenever the Upanishad scholar is presented on screen, and even later some new mission or some mission in India has decided to create Upanishads, and you see all the Upanishad scholars, they all look serious. They never smile. Like Jordan Peterson, they never smile. Like they are the serious thing they're going to say. Life is so important. Atma, Paramatma. And they never smile. They don't seem to have a sense of humor. They are not normal. They're always these serious people. Everybody's looking serious because they are obviously elite and they're intellectual. I'm like, which world of Upanishads do they belong to? The Brahmins behave in a particular way. There's a caricaturish Brahmin, and there's a caricaturish Rajput, and there's a caricaturish. But we are told that is history. When Hollywood produces Passion of the Christ, it's not. Is it history? Is because it's done in Aramaic and done with beautiful set designs. Is it historical, or is it anti-Semitic? Is it because the Jewish lobby didn't like the story? So is it now historical or not historical, or is it fantasy, or is it propaganda? Why is the Passion of the Christ not called a mythological film? How is it presented? Is it presented as a historical drama or as fantasy? So how we classify things is a complex process. You spoke of taxonomy. Taxonomy was not invented by Europeans. We have taxonomy, Chaturvarna. So the 4 varnas is a taxonomy. Chaturvarga, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Chatur Ashrama, Chatur Yuga, Rajas, Tamas. Taxonomy is a very big thing in Hinduism, in Jain practices, in Buddhist. Taxonomy is not even, every intellectual will have a form of taxonomy. Everything doesn't come out of Europe. Caste certainly did not come from Europe, no matter what this nonsense historian will say. And of course, defend his thesis with a 200-page book, which nobody wants to read. So we have to be careful. I've always looked at historians. I see the fact. I see the kind of data that they present, and I'm always very careful because religion is fluid. Our needs change. For example, Sufism became big only after Genghis Khan and his descendants, who were pagans, destroyed the city of Baghdad, and Islam went through a crisis, and they felt that, oh my God, we should give up science and focus on God. And that's why the famous Arab science movement ended, and Sufism became big. So when you read history, you see how mythology shifts over time, not just in India, but also in Europe, also in America, also in the Islamic world, everywhere. It's just that we have been told that Jai Santoshi Ma is a mythological film, but Passion of the Christ is not a historical film. And Discovery of India, written by Nehru, is not a work of fantasy. It's a serious book written on history, because all the people in that never smile. And I think that's something that you should catch. I think a good scientist will always approach everything with skepticism, whether it is coming from the left or the right, and then suddenly a new world emerges. Because when you start not bothered about the activism and the politics of the storyteller, then you start understanding where the story is coming from, what is the purpose of the story, where is it coming, what is it based on. Like anything else, there is an origin, there is a purpose, and there is a platform. If you understand these things, then lots of things fall into place.
In that, unlike the Upanishad scholars, we've had lots of opportunity to smile and laugh in the course of this conversation, which, as always with you, it's very wide-ranging and of great interest. I think it's going to appeal to a wide spectrum of people. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you. Do look us up when you're next in America.